And we traveled in a canoe. I don't know how old I was. I can't. I know I was pretty small. I must have been small because I think there was 6 of us in that canoe, 6 kids, and that one day we didn't find much blueberries, I guess. So we were sort of hungry for food. And my dad said something about going to see an old man on the island. And so we paddled up to the dock is still there today. We got there, and this old man came down and greeted us, and talking to my dad. And I guess I didn't understand English at that time. Anyway, Dad must have said something about being hungry. And then I noticed over talking to a lady there, older lady, must have been his mother. What I could understand was eggs. He's saying something about eggs. And she went in the kitchen, the same kitchen that's there today.
This was a stop-off place for the people that were going into town. And they would stop here and they would visit with Ober. And they would stop, and he always fed the people whenever he stopped here, whenever the people stopped here. And he always welcomed them. So they saw this as a welcoming place to stop and visit.
When he first came here as a young man who had a heart condition and didn't think he'd have long to live, he chose to come up here, and in his first summer here, he chose to find Indian guides and travel in the wilderness with them, found quickly that he not only enjoyed and appreciated them and gathered his health back, but that he believed in their beliefs.
In my opinion, I think the people saved his life by initiating him into ceremonies.
The place was always open to the Indians. They would come back, they would come down from up the lake, and they would stop in at Obers. And they'd walk off with some of Ober's stuff at times, and someone had said to Ober, gee, the Indians sure take advantage of you, and he said, can't happen. The Indians can't take advantage of me, because they have meant so much to me that there's no way that I can repay the debt. And I sincerely feel that that's true, that's how he felt, that he had a sincere and close relationship with the Indians in this area.
This is what I got from Ober, that he wanted to spend most of his life working with the Ojibwe, the Indians, learning their story. Then E.W. Backus came along, or he was here when Ober came first, in the first place, but anyway, he wanted to build a water-powered empire in the Quetico area, mostly. And I don't know how many dams he wanted to build up there in this beautiful country that Ober fell in love with. And Backus envisioned something like the Twin Cities with the water power and all, and especially mostly paper mills and sawmills. A group, I'm not sure what they called themselves at first, but they wanted to preserve the area up there. And they talked Ober into being a chairman of what they call the Quetico Superior Council. And he said that he first agreed to take it for 6 months, but he's doing it for 30 years.
It was such a theater, the struggle between this small cultural classical violinist, Ernest Oberholtzer, taking on this great lumber baron who it was said was worth $100 million. Even now that's considered considerable money, and in the 1920s he was certainly one of the most powerful figures that had anything to do with wilderness resources. And his paper mills were the second largest in the world in terms of total production. And so it led to a kind of an amazing standoff.
And he wanted to regulate the flow of the waters coming down the boundary. And so he wanted control, really, of a significant part of the Rainy Lake watershed, which included big chunks of Superior National Forest in Quetico Provincial Park and other places.
But he spent a lot of time going to appearing in Congress and lobbying in Ottawa and Toronto in opposition to this plan of Bacchus's.
It would have inundated hundreds of thousands of acres of forest and land. Some of the lakes, like Loch LaCroix, would have been raised as much as 80 feet.
And in process of doing that, there goes the wild rice fields, there goes the duck hunting, there goes the things that the Indian depended upon, that Bacchus could ruin their life. Because we spent a whole life, the whole history of doing that to the Indian, the white man did. And then the only way he could do that was to use the white man's tools, which was Congress, was legislature.
A bill passed in Congress that and I guess there must have been one passed in Ottawa too, to prevent Bacchus from building all these dams. And that was sort of the end of Bacchus' expansion anyway.
I think one reason that he got into wilderness protection and writing the brief on the Rainy Lake reference is that he was concerned, one of the things he wanted to do was to study the Indians and write the great opus on the Ojibwe. And he had a library of books on ethnology. And he had learned some Ojibwe. But so going after wilderness protection was a way of preserving the subject of the study that he wanted to make. And that's not to say it was a selfish act, but it certainly was a consideration, because if the wilderness was destroyed or the wilderness was badly impaired and the Indians were further impacted by the encroachments, the whole basis of what he wanted to be his life's work would be gone.
And I think in terms of who he was, I think he had authentic credentials as a wilderness figure. His earlier great trip, which is often described as his Hudson Bay trip, which was an exploratory canoe trip with an Ojibwe traveling companion, Billy McGee or Te Tapas Wewatang, whichever you choose, and he made that was an awesome experience, and I think in many ways deepened his relationship with wilderness.
In his last years of his life, he used to come and visit me a lot, and I'd go visit him. And I knew all these negatives that he had, and I thought that they were probably pretty valuable things. And then after he died, I found out I was one of his heirs. So I found his negatives and slides and some prints in a great big mess. He never really filed anything. He never took care of anything like that. And here were all these negatives and slides that I knew had some value. When I came up here and saw those negatives, I thought, somebody ought to do something about this. And I thought probably I was the one that was most qualified to do it, because I'd known him so well, and I knew photography, and I could make prints. And so I asked if the foundation would agree to me doing that, and they said, sure, go ahead and do it. And I've been stuck with it for 25 years now.
the Eskimo, the first human being we saw after 7 weeks. And we finally came over this last portage. There was this huge body of water. The next day, we could see a little figure way out in the distance moving. And Billy said, just see smoke. He pointed over this way on the shore, and we saw a little curl of smoke. And then we could see this thing was approaching. He had part of a seal on the back of that, you see. And so he came up, and his face was just wreathed in smiles. And he laid his double paddle across our canoe, and he held out his hand to me to shake hands. He then motioned for us to follow him about half a mile away along the shore. And my feet were in this hay, but awfully cold. Oh, just painfully cold. And I felt didn't know what to do with myself. I began counting without any meaning. You see, I didn't want to count. I had to count. I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I think to myself, you damn fool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. I'd go along like that. Stop. I continued I could, and some Indian names, so that I'd say them over a number of times. I couldn't help but sympathize. Every touch of what it must have been to have been set adrift in those days with these little 13-year-old boys, and at the same time encourage these thoughts of being out there in the middle and not having any place to guide you. But those were my thoughts as I went down there. When I was on that long trip up north, you'd think we might have had time. But our energies were completely absorbed on that trip. We were just going to the limit all the time. It was just as much a trip for the exploration of Billy McGee as it was for the exploration of the area. I mean, they were of equal interest to me. Well, as it turned out, except for the mass of what he did and all, there wasn't much chance to explore his psychology on that trip because we were too tired, working too hard, and you just couldn't stop for things like those were things, those sacred things that are so sacred to them, require time, leisure. And we didn't have any leisure except the time, and that wasn't too leisurely when we were camping in all the snow. And try to survive.
Ober had those who knew him described it as just a magnetic personality. He drew people to him like a magnet draws iron filings. He was charming, he was eclectic, he was spontaneous. He was described by someone who knew him well as Peter Pan. He delighted in other people. He was a great storyteller. He was a raconteur, which is how he got his Ojibwe name, the Atsakan. He hosted people at Mallard Island, and it turned it into a kind of a salon of people, the literati from New York and other people, and then Ojibways from across the lake, and woodsmen and others from around Rainy Lake would all come to this place. And Ober would be the ringmaster for the whole thing. People were charmed by it. They loved it. It was a marvelous piece of salon education.
This is fair game. Every morning, yeah. Every evening, every day I think of you. The way you love me through and through. When I'm with you, just like heaven. Holding me, sweet, sweet loving, sets me free. Every morning, everybody try it every morning. Here we go. Every morning, every evening, every day I think of you. The way you love me through and through.
You could get attacked at any moment by inspiration. From the books, from the buildings, from the land, the trees, the bird songs, the water, and also from the silence. And this morning, when I woke up, I jumped in the water, as is my habit, and it was silent. Right now I hear a little, boat motor and some voices, but so many times in the night, or even in the middle of the day, there is just this silence, except for maybe a little whisper of water. And that is the richest ground to create from.
Japanese house. Japanese house, overstanding the waters of a cold glacial lake in the middle of the North Americas. Black man, or so they say, African American of Afro-Scotch, Indian Dutch heritage, at home, at peace, at one, in a Japanese house, at the western end of a small island, on the southern part of a cool and rainy lake between Minnesota and Ontario. Branch curved gracefully, set just so in screen porch frame. Eyes wide, mind open, bark and board joined in perfection. Structure strong, wind on water, sound, the whistling rocks sing, shimmering sunlit waters dance. Some songs, if you let them, will sing you. Some rooms meditate you as well. Four walls screaming simple tranquility. Breathe. Black man in a Japanese house way up north in the Boundary Waters. It's like, who could have imagined? And sometimes you'd hear stories about the type of people that would come to the island and visit there, and you could just sit back and imagine the evenings, over all the years, the evenings that must have been there with scientists and conservationists and artists and dancers and writers and poets and just and Native American spiritual people and just people that were people in all walks of life.
God, I'm dying to hold the quiet in the dark. Like a blind man down the hall finds his way through hearing and touch. And I got more secrets than my mouth can hold. I'm naked so often I can't feel the cold. Who'll be that brave to love me in a fight?
It doesn't matter what the group is. There's a real spirit that just moves around, and I can't explain it. I'm not a musician anywhere near the degree that you people are, but there's a feeling that just generates, and it's just so amazing to me.
One day I understand when the
feel like I've built up almost like a rich soil in which to grow things because I come ready to create. And this place feels like it helps me do that. Not just the nature, but also the intention that is held here by so many creative people, starting with probably with the Ojibwe and then with Ober and his friends, and now the foundation and the people that come here. It's like we all layer up another rich layer of soil for the next group to come in and create from. It's a very powerful place.
We are hoping for the use of this place to create a living legacy, not just a legacy of memory, but a living legacy where you can kind of live the way he lived and see as he saw.
In thinking about that big picture and being grateful for our time on the island, the other big picture is because with my group we're children's writers and authors and illustrators, so it means that we also are seeing our work go out beyond our time on the island and its influence, and seeing that work reach a lot of kids, and feeling like we're part of that big picture as well. And there's an element of gratitude for that, for what the island brings to us as creative people, but also how that work then goes on to do its work in the lives of lots of kids.
The Oberholtzer Foundation, of which I'm a member of the board, has a mission statement which I support and which I helped write, that we're here to maintain his islands as a place. And it's a place where we invite people to come who share some of the interests that Ober had. His interests were diverse. Certainly conservation, nature, exploration, canoeing, music, literature. That's a fairly broad, well-rounded person, I have to think. When we moved back from New York City to Rainy Lake in 1960, I was still, as I said earlier, a teenager and still in high school. But the first place we stayed until we found our own lodging was on Obers Island. And because my mother was an artist and needed someplace to paint, she asked Ober if she could build a small studio on his island. And they did walk the island and discuss a number of different places where it could be done. And my mother drew up a sketch of what it would look like, and Ober said, by all means, go ahead and do this. And so my mother built this thing all by herself, essentially, in the summer of 1960 and 61.
I know a bit about the origin of his book collection just from things that I have run across on the island. And that other people have run across as well. Many people are curious about how any one person could amass this kind of collection with its eclectic subject matter and its huge size. And we do find sometimes correspondence with booksellers, sometimes booksellers in London, for example. I've seen a couple of those myself that indicate that Ober appeared to be ordering these books himself with the intent to acquire certain titles. Although we do have to doubt whether he actually read each and every one of them himself.
I didn't realize that my mother and my family and all of my aunts and uncles and grandparents and great-grandparents all had a history with him. I didn't know that until I came here. So Billy McGee traveled with Ober, and Tabasway Tung is Billy McGee, and he is my great-grandfather. a lot of our native people are losing the language. So the need for language revitalization is huge. And if we lose our language, we lose our culture and we lose our identity. Because language is what makes the people distinct. Language, if you no longer speak your language, then you are a descendant of the people. Language is the hallmark or the main idea of identity. So the need for language and culture. So when people learn their language, they also learn their culture, and then they learn who they are. So in the summer of 1988, that's when we began our first immersion camp here on this island. And I would say that we got our start here on Mallard Island. So those 2 summers of 1988 and 1989 is where it all began for us.
The local Ojibwe people were friends of his, and many times families lived on the island and helped with work. And there are still descendants who stop by and let us know about their days here. So the programs that are now coming to the island each year reflect the kinds of things that were happening here in Ober's lifetime. And of course they involve environmental concerns as well, since he had a career of a lifetime of helping to protect wilderness and preserve balance on Earth. So today's programs include writers' workshops, people who do painting, visual art. We've been very fortunate to have music programs here for a number of years now as well, to bring the voice of people and the voice of instruments back to the island again.
So the dream that Ober had of giving back to the people is being realized on this island. Mallard now is, and Ober and the foundation are giving it back now to the people that originally helped him in his life. So to me, it has come full circle. This is where we got our start. Now this is where we come to rejuvenate.
Good night, everybody, and thanks so much for sharing with us.
There are many ways to listen. There are many ways to see. There are many ways to walk this earth in shackles, and just as many ways to walk free. It's like coming to that bridge by the river on the darkest of darkest nights. You gotta hold on tight to your faith when you can't see the other side. Tell